Hey everybody, I'm Eric Airlock, and this is another talk on Buddhist philosophy, specifically Zen, Bodhidharma, the first patriarch of Zen, and the lineage that followed. So there is no record of Indian patriarchs or Bodhidharma in India, in Indian Buddhism. And there is very little record of Bodhidharma and the first few Chinese patriarchs of Zen, known as Chan in China, and we know it by its Japanese name Zen. Please watch my other videos on all of that, and on Taoism and the School of Names, which helps us all understand Zen and koans and paradoxes. That you have, this is the last of the Indian patriarchs, supposedly, according to the tradition and the legends and the stories and the texts. And this is the first Chinese patriarch because he is coming from India to China, and there is no record of any of this in India. So modern scholarship does not know how much any of this happened in India or how much Bodhidharma existed, which is why usually when I talk about Bodhidharma, I say, well, supposedly Bodhidharma said. Bodhidharma says one of the most wonderful things that I love to quote, and I will quote that later. He says several things I like to quote, but I will quote that in a little bit because I don't want to ruin it now, and the snap of it, because it's wonderful. But at the same time, I say supposedly said because Bodhidharma may or may not have been a guy, but I usually err on the side when people say Jesus or Buddha may have not existed because of all the stuff added to them. I usually suggest, and I like to go with, well, Lao Tzu, Jesus, Bodhidharma may have been people, but they may have had many things and many other legends and many other lives added to theirs, but there have been enough people, so we often don't have to invent people who don't exist, like people's supposedly internet Canadian girlfriend ever, but at the same time, not like my internet fake Canadian girlfriend, yes, of the time. I have several. Dang it, I swear. Is Bodhidharma may have not existed, may have not have said any of this, but at the same time, the Zen folks might be a little offended if I suggested that, and at the same time, I don't know, I wasn't there. Perhaps neither was he. But he would be better at this if he did exist, and I figure he did, at being able to do these kind of tricks of mind and plays of verbiage, having a better mind and wider mind than I, as we will talk about. Most likely, yes. If he is indeed an Indian prince who brought original Chan Zen to China, he certainly knows a thing or two I don't. So, Bodhidharma is portrayed in Chinese and Japanese art as a bushy-bearded, hoop earring-wearing, dark-skinned foreigner from a far-off land, sort of barbaric India, full of weird, savage-ish people. The mysterious West, where Buddhism comes from, journeying to the West, and not that West, yes, west to west. South to southeast. In Tibet, he is considered, Bodhidharma is, a great arhat, a sage who left the community and sought his own personal way. There's a very complex relationship with arhats and early Buddhism in India and Tibet. That is a hairy subject. Again, kind of like Bodhidharma is portrayed. And Indians and Tibetans and Mongolians are portrayed by the Chinese as Western, strange, barbarian peoples. At the same time, arhats are sort of outer, independent people who are kind of sages on their own, like the Buddha and Mahavir were, the original Jain and the original Buddhist. The Buddha was apparently the original Buddhist, perhaps. But he was sort of doing his own thing, and the relationship with arhats changes. So in fact, Bodhidharma is kind of a card-carrying monk who carries a specific school and tradition, supposedly, according to the account, to China, which would not make him much of an arhat by many people's standards, but the Tibetans consider him so. In fact, the Tibetans, I've not done a good talk on Tibetan Buddhism yet. I wanted to get through Zen, which is a little anachronistic. But in Tibet, they are not very favorable towards the Chan, aka the Zen. In fact, they shut them out most specifically, I think in the 900s. Again, that is in my notes, and I will give a talk about that at some point, filling in the particulars. So, Bodhidharma's legend is well known, but there is very little information outside of the legend. Today, the story of Bodhidharma is considered a device that links the Buddha to Huineng, Mazu, and Linji. So, according to the scholarship I was schooled in grad school, and I didn't get any of this before that, really, although you can read books and pay for it and get it on your own if you hustle, is that that there isn't much before Huineng that is Chan. What seems to have happened is Mazu was the first patriarch, and we will get to him third, who uses the word Chan, aka Zen, as a word for the school. that seems to have stuck along with the Latavattara Sutra, as we talked about, and that's clearly which was brought over, possibly from India, by Bodhidharma or other monks. But there was this early genius guy named Huineng, who was amazing, who himself is portrayed as a southern barbarian, and actually there's some inter-ethnic prejudice, which the main guy says, hey, you're a dark-skinned barbarian. How could you be some guy? But Huineng was some kind of genius who started off something like Zen, Chan in China, but he didn't call it Chan. And in fact, Mazu, the great genius guy, the great patriarch who followed him, did not always call it Chan and Zen. So you can actually see that Zen is not even Zen by name, and of course it isn't Zen by name in China, but it isn't even Chan by name in China until several of these patriarchs have already followed. So Bodhidharma would not call this Chan or Zen at all. He certainly knew the Indian term dhyana. I have one of the little things I left out of dhyana means sitting, and I left that little part out in my ranting and raving of the last lecture. So he knew that term and he knew what it meant, but that's just a term for sitting and seated meditation. That doesn't mean the school's called that or anything. And then the transliteration faking the Chinese pronunciation of that word becomes Chan and Zen, but that doesn't mean anybody, even as Bodhidharma may know how to put that word in Chinese and hear it in Chinese as he goes to China, if he did, that doesn't mean anybody would be calling this Zen, even through Huineng and Mazu, the second and third major patriarchs we will cover. There is only a single text which scholars consider to be an authentic record of Bodhidharma's teaching, the Treatise on the Two Entrances and Four Practices. It's a very early Buddhist-sounding text. The two of these, the four of that, and the three of these. Nice and memorable, nice and numerical, even, for teaching devices. Even as these guys are like, all is relative. They're the four of these, the five of these, the five of the senses, the six of these. They're very typological, even as relativists, and extreme relativists in many ways. And again, you can hash that out. So this treatise states that Bodhidharma was a Buddhist monk that from India, obviously this is a treatise about him also, who came to China to bring them the essence of Mahayana teachings. So this assumes that this school has the essence of Mahayana teachings, unlike other Mahayana schools. And what would they say? Well, they'd say they have the essence, don't they? And they have different practices and texts. In the transmission of the lamp, so I mentioned last time, and I labored to say, that the Latavattara Sutra, I hope I'm getting that right, I don't have that right here, which I have read and read through. It's an interesting text, but it's not the greatest text ever in later Zen eyes even. That the transmission of the lamp is one of the first major Song Dynasty koan records. In fact, the transmission is not the first koan record, but the first major Song official one. And that is in the year 1004. What a great year that is, 1004. What's going on elsewhere, in the world? And the Islamic world's kind of kicking. Europe is getting, I think there were like 3 popes, 2 in France at that time, or perhaps that's 900. But yeah, there's the transmission of the lamp is this text, which is koan case, koan case, koan case. This guy says this to this guy, and then haha, and then another one. So in that it's Song Dynasty. So we're talking the year 1000, in the year 1000 of the future. Yes? What's the year 0 of the future? We don't know. I got a tiger here. Hey, buddy. Come say hey. Got a tiger here. Hey, buddy. Yes. Again, be a good Taoist and slowly tame the tiger, and they will consider you one of their own. I will put you over here. But yes, in the transmission of the lamp, the first series of the koan record, we find the story, and this is because these koan records, again, what they're doing is they are not only giving us the brilliant moments of Zen, they are also establishing Bodhidharma talked to this guy, and this guy talked to that guy, and this guy talked to that guy. It's hammering out the patriarchy and hammering out this guy to that guy to that guy to that guy, and is very important to these people in this text. These texts are hammering out the lineage of guys descended from the Buddha who talked to the guy who talked to the guy who talked to the guy. The man sitting next to the man sitting next to the man, as the Robin Harris bit goes. Again, and who called that guy a piccolo player, Anyway, most people don't know that bit, so I'll move on. The first of the great Song Dynasty koan records, the 27th Indian patriarch, right before the 28th, which is a nice number, I believe 28, 4 times 7, yes, if I know my math like the Indians do, and that would be a nice numeric number of sorts. Again, numerology is thought to be practical and important, plenty in the ancient world, and helps reinforce things. Mentally, physically, everything. Socially. The 27th Indian patriarch has to talk to the 28th guy, and the 28th guy is going to be Bodhidharma, folks. Come on down. So the Indian patriarch Prajnatara who I mentioned last time. It's like, that guy's going to be important. I was like, blah, 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 Prajnatara. And I said, I'm passing over a lot of these people without mentioning them. Because for our purposes, there's a lot of back to the fourth. But in fact, what happens is, and I'm going to be quite honest here, we're going to skip over all the Indian patriarchs who may or may not have existed according to modern scholarship, because those moments are interesting and they were probably thought up somewhat maybe after the fact, but it is the great moments of the Chinese patriarchs we are going to stick to. Not only because that seems much more reasonable in current scholarship to say those things may have very well happened and then gotten framed in these koan records, but honestly, having gone through the Indian Patriarch record and the Transmission of the Lamp, if you want it, you can read it all in the Transmission of the Lamp, because it's a document documenting those Indian patriarchs. Up until Bodhidharma and the Chinese folks, I have to say, it's good, but it gets really great with Huineng, Mazu, and others. So Bodhidharma and the Indian patriarchs, this may all be back-formed, but we do not know, and I was not there. Yes, unless we're all places at all times. So, or we can translocate like Indian gurus in the 60s, and then not after that. So if, maybe they can locate from there to here. So we have these, Prajnatara goes to a southern Indian king. Now, early Buddhism in India is northern Pali-speaking Buddhism, along with the Jains of northern India. But in latter Buddhism, in fact, it definitely spread in Sri Lanka. It was actually kept there after the Muslims chased it out of a lot of India, but not Hinduism plenty. And then survived a lot in East Asia, such that a lot of people identify Buddhism with Sri Lanka and with Thailand and Cambodia, but especially identify it with Chinese and Japanese Pure Land Buddhism and Zen. You probably know Buddhism, again, as mentioned with stuff. You probably identify it on site as an American, no matter who you are, possibly, even Asian American often, as Pure Land and then or Zen, which is what happens in China and then elsewhere, especially Japan and other places. So, Thailand, Vietnam, Vietnam, Thailand and Cambodia are actually Theravada. So let's get back to Prajnatara. So, but you have here a southern Buddhist king. Prajnatara goes to southern India, and he has here 3 sons. This is strangely kind of like the Japanese samurai story I won't retell right here. The youngest son oddly has it. The first, Prajnatara goes to the king's 3 sons, and he's going to test the king's 3 sons just like the Japanese samurai in the story I mentioned before. So he holds up a priceless diamond, possibly, again, I don't know, the Star of India, which is now not in the British Museum, but I believe in whatever place the British torture people or did or something. You know, I guess there's long lines that get tortured there now. I'm forgetting the place name. There's a diamond, and he holds up this diamond, possibly, again, the Star of India, and he says, so is there anything that surpasses this diamond, this priceless, precious material object, that in clarity? So, of course, diamonds are not only prized because they're all reflective and nice metaphor for the mind, and the diamond mind is a metaphor they bring up a lot in Buddhism. You can see a lot of people have there's a diamond, and some people get tattoo, and it isn't related with flawlessness, which is kind of an inner purity and an inner heart, which is awesome. That there is, and in that, I don't think Buddhist monks can get so tattooed. I think there's serious regulations about that and other stuff. But that essentially you, with that diamond is very much the flawless clarity of it. So it says in there, he says, is there anything that's clearer than this? The first 2 sons say nothing surpasses it and that only Prajnatara is worthy of it. Now that's actually a bad answer. They think it's a good answer, and they think it's a good answer because, oh no, nothing's better than it, and you're so awesome, you, not us, you, sir, good sir, that you should have that priceless thing because it's so awesome outside of us and you're so awesome outside of us. Now, I keep mentioning Taoism and then Zen, also Buddhism and many systems of thought, do say the power was inside you all along and you just need to clarify it. So if they're saying, oh yeah, that thing outside me is good and you get it, that doesn't necessarily contradict totally there's inner clarity or we all share it, but it definitely doesn't sound like the sons, the older son and the middle son, understand that the power is inside them all along. So the youngest son, now this is Bodhidharma, but his name is not yet. It is Bodhitara, because he's going to be Bodhidharma real soon, real close to that. Bodhitara, soon Bodhidharma, the youngest son, says the diamond has worldly light, but the light of the mind is supreme, that the diamond cannot be a diamond or a priceless treasure without the mind. Without human beings, Wittgenstein says a train station on Mars is utterly meaningless if no one's there. Not space, not Nazi zombie astronauts, not nobody. So without people valuing diamonds, how much is a diamond worth? Is it priceless or not? Well, it's priceless in that it's worthless, of course. So he says without the mind to connect to it, tree falling in the forest, does it make a sound? Is going to come plenty pretty soon. Well, without the mind staring at the diamond in the circuit of the subjective and the object altogether, that diamond isn't worth a single thing. And of course, the two first brothers did not say that. He says the diamond cannot be a diamond or a priceless treasure without the mind, and the mind thus is the treasure and gives things its value, and that's where the value is. And that Prajnatara, the guru, has the way to reveal the true treasure, just as he holds up the diamond. Now what did we just get? We just got the Buddha held up a lotus, and he gave the silent transmission. So here comes the 27th guy. He's looking for the secret. He's looking for, kind of like the Tibetans, looking for the Dalai Lama, although that's specifically not Zen and Tibetan Buddhism, and they reject very much Chan and Zen as a separate foreign or Chinese tradition. They don't like coming in so much. Let's leave that where it is. That you have here that Prajnatara is, he says, just like you're holding up the diamond, which, notice, this isn't holding up a lotus. This is holding up, now we're in a princely king court. This stuff seems to have succeeded decently. He's in front of a kingly audience, just as Bodhidharma is going to get in front of the Emperor of China and up the ante. Very soon, this is a local Indian king, his father. He's going to go straight to the Emperor of China, which he may have never did because, oh my, OMG, kids, he's going to walk right up to the Emperor of China. He's not going to slap him, but yeah, you don't just do that. And he says, just like you're holding up the diamond, not a cheap lotus flower. This is just, hey, it's kind of free unless you're paying for it downtown. It's like, hey, priceless diamond, kids. It's like, nah, that just like the lotus is you holding it up, teaching us something. And people hold up a fist, hold up all sorts of things in Zen, and it means something. And you have the way to hold up the mind in front of us, which is very much like what this whole koan thing is doing for us right here. It's holding up the human mind in front of us. I'm holding up the mind in front of you. I'm holding up silently because I'm not telling you I'm holding up the mind in front of you, even as I'm telling you these words. That I'm holding up the lotus in front of you. I'm holding up the diamond in front of you. I'm holding up this koan case in front of you. Later Buddhists are reading this text to themselves saying, this is holding up the human mind, human subjectivity, philosophy in front of us. Now you're holding up the diamond without the object, without the subject and the object. There is no ish at all. There is no subjective or objective. There is no meaning. You know this. You can hold up the lotus like the Buddha, which is why you're holding up a diamond in front of me. This kid is on the wavelength. Whether or not this happened, this is exactly the story to tell, that this kid is on the wavelength of Mayakashapa. Again, I'm pretty dang sure I'm getting those syllables right. Again, is that he is the first guy, and then you have, because he smiles and he gets it, and this guy gives a bit more of a speech, doesn't he, than Mayakashapa, and then the Buddha says, I give it to that guy, in words. But here we go. He gave the words that shows you he is on the same radio frequency as the Buddha. Not just a mental, but a mental physical thing here. Although definitely it emphasizes the mind and the mental above the worldly physical. You find that duality in Buddhism a lot, and you find that in skeptical thought. It is really the mind and the psychology above the physical, but it's the mental physical both. And that play happens in Buddhism, even in the latest, I would say, of skeptical thought, postmodernism, a lot. I won't mention all that now, though, or get into it. So Prajnatara then keeps it going. He's like, all right, now he asks him more questions because this kid is showing it. So let's do it, kid. Test number 2, question number 2. You ready? Prajnatara asks, what is the highest of things? This is one of my favorite things, and I did not say it and ruin it ahead of time. He asks kid Bodhidharma, what is the tallest of things? Bodhidharma says the self, the ego, or our own understanding of ourselves. Again, we can understand ego and self in interesting ways, along with Buddhism's psychoanalysis, modern psychology. The self is the tallest. That implies what is tall. Across human culture, something as tall as proud. Something, again, is that up and down. You can ask Lakoff and Johnson about this if they're still together as a band. Is that, again, tall and up is proud or good. Sometimes up, down, but proud definitely here is what it implies. Because the self, of course, is something you're supposed to somewhat release from or relax with, if not extinguish in Buddhism. So the highest of things is the self. Prajnatara says, what is the greatest of all things? And Bodhidharma says, Buddha nature. which is in many ways equivalent to the mind and the mind we all share if we're deep into it. So in a certain sense, and the way I often like to say this is, the tallest thing on earth is in the cosmos is the self. The widest thing is the mind. Now, I like to say it that way because wide and mind kind of rhyme, and I am doing a bit of violence, as the Taoists say, by changing the words a tiny bit or using any words at all. But I like to say it that way because it does seem like these two questions that Prajnatara asks the young guy who is probably educated in Buddhism, come to thunk it, because he's a prince, but he is not some super monastic guy yet, so he happens to be on it, isn't he? And he says, what's the tallest, effectively, of things? The self. What's the greatest? Well, if the self is the tallest and nothing is taller, there's a trick here which is wonderful to point out. The greatest of things, and the pun here in the language is, of course, the greatest of things could be like the widest, largest of things a lot in the language also. Not only in English, but certainly in the Chinese. So you have here that you have the widest, the grandest, the greatest, the most empire-widest of things, the grandest of things. So the proudest of things and the tallest of things is the self, and you can't get over, it implies, in a wonderful way, you don't get over the height of pride, but you can get around it all the time. That itself, some may say I'm overinterpreting, but in light of later passages of Zhao in the Chinese, and the guy I like the most, he is playing on these kinds of things where I don't get over the self, I'm a jerk, and he's a very Taoistic guy. He's like, I'm a jerk, hey, I'm a body guy, what do you know, hey, and he's doing that, and then he says, because you don't extinguish anything. What am I talking about? Which in league with this certainly does sound like I get to be a Taoist trickster and act like a jerk. Please, see the other videos about Taoists acting like jerks and tricksters and Robin Hoods. Why? Because you never fully, as Joshu says with this Zen stuff, which is different from what the Buddha says. The Buddha says, extinguish pride and greed and hate. And Joshu says, you don't ever extinguish those things. So what that actually suggests here is, no, you always keep kind of yourself around. It's a useful thing, whatever. But you can always get around it, and I can see wider around it. There is often with human beings with eye metaphors, and our eyes are kind of wider than they are taller into. There is kind of width and breadth and kind of the hunter eye vision that is often associated with humankind with wisdom and watching patiently, like hunter eyes. If you pay attention to something psychologists have said, as opposed to phase out and look at the wider picture, you can pay attention to me and then pay attention to the wall and all the craziness, like a TGI Fridays, on hallucinogens behind me. And then, you can pop in and out and see me and then see behind me and see me and stuff and watch me move around like this while watching the wall behind me and me at the same time. That width and focus of the self, width of the mind can get around. But you don't extinguish anything because you have the shape of your two eyes and your skull and your ego you're always looking through with your fellow human beings. That is my interpretation. I have already said I am going to freely interpret these things. I welcome, of course, all sorts of interpretation back and forth. I am, as mentioned, going to argue the philosophy of Zen as best I can, and I do believe that is clarified by looking at Taoism, looking at what these Zen Buddhists are imitating in Taoism, and then what twists they turn on it, because what else is there to look at as the meaning and the teachings. And a lot of these Zen puzzle riddle koans, they make a lot more sense if you look at them as simple physical kinds of puzzles, and you say, well, if you don't ever get over the ego, which Linji and Joshu tell you, then you could get around it. And it's a nice, simple spatial puzzle that then could just stack more and more and more meaning the more and more you study it for years. I don't doubt, which is why I'm not going to tell you that's all it means, but it certainly does seem to mean that in league with other texts. So I do believe in teaching that, even though I'm not going to tell you that's the final meaning or the fullness of it, because if it's meant to unlock you from perspective, then that wouldn't be, would it? It would just be one meaning dovetailing, hopefully plenty of it, that then leads on to other things in life or ways of understanding things more openly rather than closed. So how could that close out the meaning? Again, perhaps some think I'm reading too deeply into those two lines. I do think in league with other things. No, it's that you don't extinguish the self for the Zen or the Taoists because they act like jerks. That's different from other Buddhists, because other Buddhists are still like, no, you extinguish the self with perfect clarity. Latter Buddhists are going to specifically say, what are you talking about? Slap this guy. Come on, you don't extinguish anything, you bastard. Because of things like this. And this is the first major Zen guy, again, of China. Well, he's Indian, but again, and he says it's like the self is the tallest thing, period. He doesn't say, and then it falls. He says, period. That's it. That's as tall as you can get, as proud as you can get as the self. And it's like, snap, you're proud. You're as tall as anybody, or taller. There you go. You know? It's wonderful. It's a wonderful, simple teaching. And again, it's deep, and the more you stared at it or sitting at a wall only eating rice gruel, that could eventually, as with things, imagine you're a monk, imagine you don't have much education, imagine you're staring at that. What human simple realities would you find in it? Well, something really simple that would not take a lot of academic terminology, and yet it should be something brilliant. Otherwise, how would we translate this into English, or anybody remember any of this, or this be transmitted in the lamp or text or otherwise, down to us? It must mean something pretty powerful to somebody, huh? Which means several monks stared at it, and they got something pretty powerful out of it, and then they went to the master, they said, huh? And the master's like, or just didn't say anything, which is usually a positive approval in Zen. You got away with murder, and killing the Buddha and all that. So, yeah. The thing is that there's insights to have here that then they are looking at you like, did you get it? So there's got to be something here real easy to get but hard all the same time would probably be it. Again, listening to all the other words, that seems fair to say. And again, thankfully, that does not exhaust everything or mean now you've heard it, you're done with it. Because it's pointing at the problems of the human mind, which is quite the diamond. So it seems that Buddha nature is as high, and mind and our experience, if you'd like, because Buddha nature is kind of the whole experience of reality and how we are always in it and in the field of it for Mahayana teaching. So consciousness, Buddha nature, is as high as we hold ourselves, but far wider. And notice we are tall or wide and modest and low, like water is wide. Yes, the water is wide. I'm not going to sing the song because we got to move on. So Prajnatara realizes that Prince Bodhidharma is his dharma heir. This is the kid. Again, Yoda's like, can I teach this guy this Lukirka man? The one who will continue the silent teaching. And so he renames him Bodhidharma, short commute, makes him a monk, and tells him to go to China. Bodhidharma crossed into southern China. In fact, what happens here is he apparently waits. He tells him wait for a couple of years and then go there at the appropriate year, which is kind of weirdly, it's almost like Jesus goes to Egypt for a while and then comes back at the right time. It is sort of like in the scholarship of the text afterwards, it's like maybe these details are a little bit, hey, he has to be in the right place at the right time for the right guy. So Bodhidharma is like all enlightened as a prince, but then he has to just keep that under a cloak or a robe for a while, or princely robes, and then he says, and when it's safe, then go to China, which sort of allows him to be in the right place at the right time, conveniently, other than me not knowing what else happened. Bodhidharma crossed into southern China and went straight to the palace of Emperor Wu, a great patron of Buddhist scholastic and devotional schools such as the Tiantai, who are competing Buddhist schools, the competing Buddhist school, and others, Pure Land, with Zen, with Chan at the time, as it's coming up. So these are sort of their Buddhist opponents, and this guy is a fan of them. The emperor asks Bodhidharma, how does he get an audience so immediately? How long did he have to wait? He's good at waiting and staring at walls, so he can probably wait in a queue or two. The emperor says to Bodhidharma, I have some monk who wandered in with a Lakavatara Sutra. As far as this guy knows, hey, there's a new Buddhist school that has this new sutra. Okay, let her rip. I like Indian texts and monks and stuff. I patronize that kind of thing. I don't mean to be so patronizing, though. Yes, a little smug. He says, I have built many temples, copied many books, and supported many monasteries of monks and nuns. Peter, it's sunny Southern California. What merit have I gained? And Bodhidharma replies, none whatsoever. These things are shadows. Real merit is wisdom. Now, that would not be that, hey, every handful of rice means nothing at all to anyone, but it is very much like, well, this diamond is worthless without the mind. It's very dualistic, kind of. And later, again, Zhao does not speak so dualistically as much as Bodhidharma. But he's like, none. Zero. Good day, sir. Why? Well, because actually, from a Buddhist, Taoist perspective, there's a very easy answer here, which, after staring this for a while, I don't think it's actually ruining it to say. If you always have the mind you have and everyone else has it, and this is a bit of Jesus as well, if the poor and the lepers always have the same mind, and if human beings all have the same heart, soul, what have yous, Buddha nature, Well, then after you've built many temples, you might have a way to have a happier life and this or that, but ultimately, what difference have you made between you and others? Well, no matter how great you become, Heraclitus says the danger of gaining in life and doing good things is pride. Now you can be proud. I mean, an idiot who does nothing can be proud, clearly. There's the internet. We can troll through that or troll others. But at the same time, if you've achieved things, now you can suffer from the poison of pride, and now you can look like a real jerk. Good Lord, let's not point out names right now. But if you can fall from grace after great achievement, well, then pride is the human disease and the potential fall, and that self is always the tent pole of the mind, propping it up. And if we don't extinguish it, then you just got to avoid that tent pole when you're walking through the tent, I suppose. Again, bawdy jokes that are Taoist aside, we'll get plenty of those with the Zen folks and Joshu later. But if these things are shadows, real merit is wisdom. It's like, no, because all there is you and I can become wiser, and you and I can have a better character. You and I can become stronger as people. But for the rest of our lives, $20 will mean something possibly, and yet then it'll mean nothing and we could lose it. But you cannot lose, in a certain sense, the mind or the clarity and the depth of character that can let through that mind. Joshu says, ships can't sail where the water is too shallow. If you have the water and then you deepen the channel, you're not gaining or losing by building a temple or two. That's nothing. And so that seems to be the sense. It's like if we all have the mind, the Taoist is just a bum because, hey, I have the mind and I can widen it. Well, then building something or having a cloak or two is nothing. And that is exactly what he tells him. And that makes a very simple sort of sense, as it could make all kinds of other sense. Bodhidharma says nothing. Real merit is wisdom. Now, you might imagine this is a slap in the emperor's face, even though Bodhidharma couldn't have got within, he gets within earshot, but he does, and this is a lot like the movie Hero, if you've ever watched that. Again, he gets to sit closer to the emperor, but this time not so much, because again, the emperor, taken aback, even though he's in the chair, asks, what is the principle of the sacred Dharma? Okay, so what's the teaching of Buddhism from your guys' school? Come on, make with the Buddha Dharma and make with the 3 points of the teaching of your guys' thing. Bodhidharma replies, everything is empty. Nothing is holy. Which, of course, is like, well, give me the special points of the special out of the special that lets me separate the good from the bad according to your Buddhist school. And, of course, you could accuse this language of also doing that if you want to get so meta. But he basically says, no, there's nothing particularly that's sacred at all. Again, which matches what I was just explaining about the other thing as best as I could tell it to you. Nothing holy, which, of course, he just said, hey, you didn't store up any merit by building a bunch of temples and keep paying a bunch of monks and nuns' salaries. So, of course, what are my points of what I'm going to teach you? Well, there's nothing particular to teach you, because all you do is you grow drop by drop. If that is not, I would say a lot of people are frustrated here, and I was at first reading this stuff. I will advise, once you learn Taoism and Buddhism and a lot of stuff, and you slowly pay attention, what they are suggesting, though, is I cannot point to a temple that would make you a good person if you built it. But if you grew drop by drop in wisdom day by day, wall sitting or otherwise, you could do with temples or what you like or not, and it would not matter. This does not mean temples are evil, don't build them. He didn't say that. But because actually there's going to be building at Chan temples in the song and stuff. What he did say, however, is that you don't become a good person or not by building temples. That's not what you do. You grow slowly drop by drop with wisdom, which honestly should go unsaid and uncategorized. So mea culpa, my apologies. My bad, y'all, So the emperor, enraged now this definitely shows you this emperor has been patronizing schools of Buddhism, but if you are a Taoist or you are a Zen Buddhist and somebody starts freaking out on you, that person is classically in the text not with the way. They're a punk. They're a jerk. They're being called out. Now the emperor himself is enraged. That means this emperor, with all the luxury in the world in China, I always mention to people, don't think the West is the only thing where in the Brothers Grimm you'll hear queens or anything maligned, and that milady, and that does not mean that the Middle Ages were the most democratic freedom time. So if remember, human cultures are critical of authority as long as Hume tells us, you have something else like the church to lean against the state. You can be critical of anybody. If you have science to lean against religion now, you can be critical of all kinds of things. And you can be critical of science. Is it being political? Is it being political? Is it religious? You can do anything you like. So actually here, the emperor has been patronizing many schools of Buddhism that are not Chan. And so here are the Chan in China saying, that emperor and all those Buddhists, those are worthless jerks, aren't they? I mean, it also is like, but you and I are also empty too. But this definitely shows you, after so much Buddhism, after so much merit, there is none. The emperor is showing you there is none because he is getting enraged. The simplest parts of the text Wonderful. These texts are remembered for a reason, because people get something out of them. So if it seems at first when I read this, I was like, well, that's a hilarious answer. That's a great slap in the face. I don't get it, though. That seems like a cheap shot, But there's layers and layers and layers and layers of the more perfect onion we try to build here. Yes? Again, to form a more perfect onion. And I'm not talking about the humor rag. So, in good faith and humor here, the emperor, enraged, asked, "Who is this who stands before me?" Which is taken two different ways here. Who the heck are you, man? But also, so who is this who stands before me? So, okay, if you don't know what I've gained, if you don't know what your school stands for, then what the heck do you stand for, pal? And perhaps this emperor, if this ever happened, I don't think it may have, because of holy heck. But because of this, he says, okay, then who the heck are you then? Tell me something. Bodhidharma replies, I don't know, which is good words to not say anything, turns and leaves. This is where in Hero, if you've ever seen that movie, you get the 11 arrows right in the back. But Bodhidharma apparently wanders off into the hills here, and he goes on to form a school, which is amazing. Because again, not only did he seem to wander into an audience with the emperor, we're told in Song China, in the emperor's court, but then he chooses that emperor who patronized other schools of Buddhism, according to this emperor now, or these emperors, is a punk, during the Tong. To the Song, though, that guy, at least that emperor, there are many during the Tong, is a punk. Yeah, screw that guy, because, hey, this guy has the real teaching, and he just walks out of the emperor's palace like a boss. But he isn't the boss. The boy walks out of the boss's palace, It's quite the cubicle. So Bodhidharma is said to have practiced wall sitting in a cave and staring at a wall while meditating, long after the legend developed that Bodhidharma lived and taught in the Shaolin Monastery, where he started Kung Fu, also known as Kung Fu. That is like Tao is now, it was spelled with a T, now a D, and yet QI is Chi, which is weird. That it used to be Kung Fu, but now that is more properly spelled Gung Fu, because it used to be K, but it's actually more pronounced like a G. And again, see me or anyone other than me better for those pronunciations. Also known as Shaolin Boxing, to old school subtitles. Physical exercises and martial arts for the Buddhist monks there. The Shaolin Temple was originally, many say, a Taoist temple to a god that became a temple to a Buddhist goddess. Could be a crossover there and quite a transition. And it could be that Kung Fu is derived from earlier Taoist Tai Chi exercises, which may have been influenced by earlier Indian yogic postures and martial arts. That is something that you will find many martial artists on the internet giving their opinions. I will simply tell you that and nothing else or speculate. People even go back to ancient Egypt. Some Afrocentric people make amazingly awesome points that are ignored, and then people focus on the Afrocentric points they don't like or they think are rather crazy. But Afrocentric thinkers have pointed out, well, there's Egyptian martial arts manuals, and then there's Indian ones, and it all could be interrelated, or people obviously are fighting. I saw somebody post medieval sword moves, from medieval Europe the other day. Well, if people are fighting, drawing images of fighting and teaching people fighting would be something everybody would be motivated to do, unfortunately and sadly, because there's many different groups of people itself. But then again, is any of this interrelated? Honestly, we do not know that Indian stuff is related to Tai Chi and then is related to Kung Fu, even though if Bodhidharma's a guy, well, there you have a route itself, even though that would be very weird if that was the guy, honestly, in history, rather than got roped up with him. All of these things together, weirdly, and this one guy, like with Lao Tzu's was possibly three guys all roped into one, is that definitely with this, there is the origin of something like maybe you can watch on YouTube Shaolin monks today, from China, who can do some pretty amazing acrobatics. All right. So that said, that is the talk on Bodhidharma, although perhaps we should not say a word, although he did. Otherwise, we wouldn't have him, if he was. So, whether or not you or I are, I will give a talk next on Huineng, which is where Chan finds its first native Chinese patriarch, who is even mocked for being a dark-skinned foreign southern barbarian with nice dose of xenophobia, which we, of course, got over completely as humanity in ancient China. And along, I guess, medieval-ish, whatever the words are today. And I will start up with Huineng next time, and much happiness. I will try, I may do something on the symposium later tonight and do the Huineng tomorrow. But much happiness. Don't stare at too many walls for too long, or eat too much free-range rice gruel, if you can catch it, if your refrigerator's running. And I will see you if I ever see you.